Gated communities are generally about keeping the people inside safe from the outside world. Communities with gates control who gets in and who doesn't. The point is to be safe on the inside with those who've been checked out, not gathering inside to be sent out. Recently read about a preacher, Jill Duffield, who stopped going to a gathering in her city because it takes place in a large gated community. Before attending the meeting, she had to contact one of the people inside the community to let them know that she was coming. She had to be sure that they put her name on the list at the gate. And there were specific entrances that were reserved for residents and others that were reserved for guests. However, she learned that her GPS couldn't tell the difference. So sometimes she would pull up to a gate and be at the wrong gate and have to do a U-turn or back up, and it disturbed the residents because she was at the wrong gate. And sometimes her GPS, wanting to direct her on the shortest distance between 2 points, would take her into the community and then out a gate and try to take her back into another gate, and the bewildered gatekeeper would have to start the entire process once again. So she finally decided just to stop going to the meetings. It wasn't worth the hassle. But it caused her to wonder how often the church becomes that kind of gated community, a community insulated, sometimes fearful, exclusive. You need a pass to get in kind of community. Jill wonders if maybe Jesus' gated community is not one that huddles inside the fence to stay safe at all costs, but instead is one that is gathered together to be nurtured in order to follow the shepherd out. It's true that Jesus is the gate by which we enter the fold, but Jesus, the Good Shepherd, is also the one who leads the flock out. And Jill concludes, maybe Jesus lets us into the gate so that we can go out and lead others back. There seems to be that kind of dynamic movement in this passage from John. Jesus says, "Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture." Jesus' flock doesn't stay in one place. They are on the move. At least that's the aspect of the story that has gotten my attention this week. This simple movement of coming into the fold and going out again as we seek to follow Jesus in the world. I was reading a book by Tom Long. As he wrestled with what it means to be a Christian, he insists that it's a way of life. Christians are people who follow the way of Jesus, as surely as sheep follow the shepherd. They come into the fold for protection. They follow the shepherd's voice as he leads them out into green pastures. Both are equally important. The fold is essential for forming Christians, but the goal is service in the world. Long compares it to being a Texan. He says, you do not become a Texan by reading the books of Larry McMurtry or by watching old John Wayne movies. To become a Texan, well, you have to live in Texas. In the same way, you do not become a Christian by simply reading books or watching movies, although we do that from time to time in order to help us gather ideas about Christianity. But you become a Christian by living in Christian community, being among other Christians as we talk about faith, as we act on our faith day by day. A According to Long, we become Christians by becoming tangled up in the messy business of working with, learning with, worshiping with, serving with, talking with, and hanging around other Christians. It could also be compared to the life of a runner. You do not become a runner by sitting on the sofa and thinking about running. You have to follow the disciplines of running. You have to eat the right things. You have to learn to stretch. You have to hang out with other runners and learn from them. You have to listen to your coach. But most of all, you have to make time to run. You get up early. You stay out late. You run, rain or shine, but you run. Christians follow the disciplines of faith. We support each other. We grow together. And we follow where Jesus leads. The image of the community of Jesus as a flock of sheep safely in the sheepfold is important today, at least for a couple of reasons. First, we had a baptism earlier today, the baptism of Nora Coleman. Nora is just a tiny little baby. Nora was given to Jesus today, entrusted to Jesus to keep her safe. Jesus is the gate and promises that anyone who enters by him will be saved. If you've ever seen an ancient sheepfold made of walls of stones, and usually with a very narrow gate, you know that it's possible for the shepherd to position themselves to even sit down in the gate and block the gate to keep the sheep safe on the inside and any threat on the outside. In the sheepfold, Nora is safe. And we have a responsibility to Christians toward Nora and everyone else in the fold. We promised earlier today on your behalf, we promised to guide and nurture her to know and follow Christ. In the sheepfold, we help her develop the disciplines of being Christian just by hanging around us. That's right, us. Which means we have promised to be faithful as we follow Christ, so that our lives exemplify the abundant life that Jesus has promised each follower. We want her to be able to look at us and know the love of God. Still, as a church, we do not live in the fold any more than we live in this building. We are called to follow Jesus as he leads us out into the world. So today, we install new church officers to lead us as we seek to faithfully follow Jesus in the world. Long again says that even the church can sometimes get caught up in the messy business of being the church, but anything less is to ignore the voice of Christ calling us to follow in his way. A few years ago, a man named Kevin left his job as an environmental consultant. He was on a safe career track, but he sensed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So he left his job to open the coffee shop that he had dreamed of owning and to operate it with his family in a suburb of a large city. And within a few months of his new venture, he took the next step. He felt a calling that his coffee shop would somehow connect people to God. It would be a place where people could come in out of the world and find refuge from the busyness of life. And then, refreshed, restored, they would venture back out into the busy, often challenging world. So Kevin reached out to the local churches in his neighborhood to help develop a partnership that would touch their city. He also reached out to the one church leader he actually knew, Earl Krebs, who is a ministry consultant. They found the responses of the churches illuminating. Some churches simply were not interested. Others could not have been more excited about the possibility of partnering with a coffee shop. When all was said and done, Earl and Kevin came to a basic conclusion. The churches that wanted to connect to their community were going to find ways to connect, regardless of how unconventional the opportunity might be. The churches that really did not want to connect were not going to connect, regardless of how conventional the opportunity might be. In a similar theme, the recently elected bishop of the Episcopal Church, Michael Curry, has called on the members of the Episcopal Church to embrace Christ's calling to mission in the world. In an address to the church, he declared, "Now is our time to go into the world, to let the world know that there is a God who loves us, a God who will not let us go, and that God's love can set us free." To make his point, Bishop Curry tells a story from a few years ago. He was in a coffee shop in Raleigh, North Carolina, of all places, just a few blocks from the Episcopal offices. While in line, he started a conversation with a gentleman who turned out to be a Mennonite pastor. The Mennonite pastor had been sent to Raleigh by the Mennonite church to organize a church in the streets of the city without walls. As they talked over coffee, something he said really struck with Bishop Curry. He said that the Mennonite community asked the pastor to do this because they believed in today's world the church can no longer wait for people to come to us. The church must go to where people are. Now is our time to go into the world, to share the good news of God's love in Jesus Christ, to invite the world into the community of faith through Jesus, who is the gate. Now is our time to go into the world and let the world know that there is a God who loves us, a God who will not let us go. And then to follow Christ back into the world with the promise of abundant life. Thanks be to God. Let us pray.